She demanded unlimited food, or our friendship was over. Hey everyone, welcome back to Reddit Bit. Have you ever invited someone to dinner who ended up eating half of all the food meant for everyone? Imagine spending hours preparing a special meal for 10 friends, only to watch in shock as one guest piles their plate with enough food for 5 people. What would you do in that moment? Say something. Stay silent. This isn't just about food. It's about the invisible lines we draw in relationships, the impossible choices we face when trying to be kind without becoming a doormat, and what happens when someone crosses those boundaries. Let's dive in.
Hey there, I'm Sophie, a 34-year-old food photographer living in London. I've always believed that breaking bread together creates the most authentic connections between people. That's why 3 years ago, I started hosting monthly dinner parties at my flat in Notting Hill. These aren't just any dinner parties. They're elaborate, themed affairs where my friends and I escape our ordinary lives for one magical evening each month. We call ourselves the Feast Club, and it's become our sacred ritual. Our group is quite diverse. There's me. I've struggled with an eating disorder in my 20s and lost over 100 pounds after recovery. My best friend Mia is a classical violinist with anxiety who plays for the London Symphony Orchestra. Thomas uses a wheelchair after a cycling accident and works as a brilliant architect. Eleanor battles depression while running her vintage clothing shop. We're a collection of beautiful misfits who found each other through life's complicated journey. What makes our dinners special isn't just the food, it's the atmosphere. We transform my modest flat into something extraordinary. Everyone contributes 30 pounds, except whoever's cooking. We dress in vintage attire, play classical music on Mia's violin, use proper china, and pretend we're characters in a period drama. For one evening monthly, we escape our struggles and become glamorous versions of ourselves. These dinners saved me during my darkest times, Eleanor once confessed. Having something beautiful to look forward to kept me going when nothing else did. We rotate between my flat and Mia's Victorian townhouse since we're the only ones with enough space and proper cooking skills. The others joke that we're the Nigella Lawsons of the group, which I take as the highest compliment. Last autumn, our friend Fiona, a librarian at the British Museum who'd been painfully single since her divorce, excitedly announced she had a new girlfriend. We were thrilled. Fiona deserved happiness after everything she'd been through. "I can't wait for you all to meet Gabrielle," Fiona texted our group chat. "She's absolutely wonderful, and I think she'll fit perfectly into our little family." When my turn to host came around in November, I planned something special: my signature beef Wellington, roasted vegetables, and chocolate souffle for dessert. I wanted to welcome Gabrielle properly and show Fiona how happy we were for her. The evening of the dinner, I was arranging flowers when the doorbell rang. Fiona entered with a woman I wasn't prepared for. Gabrielle was significantly larger than anyone I'd ever met in person, probably around 220 kilos. She moved slowly, breathing heavily from the short walk from the taxi to my door. My mind raced with practical concerns. Would my dining chairs support her? Would she be comfortable in my space? But I quickly composed myself, smiled warmly, and welcomed her. "Lovely to meet you, Gabrielle. Fiona has told us wonderful things about you. Please come in. Can I offer you something to drink?" I noticed Fiona watching me anxiously, clearly concerned about how we'd react to Gabrielle's size. I made sure my smile remained genuine and my welcome sincere. After all, I'd been judged for my weight before, and I refused to make anyone else feel that way in my home. Thankfully, my grandfather had been a large man, so I had a sturdy armchair that worked perfectly for Gabrielle. She seemed relieved when I casually directed her to it, as if I'd planned it that way all along. Dinner started pleasantly enough. I served individual salads followed by a butternut squash soup. I noticed Gabrielle finished both courses quickly, keeping her empty bowls in front of her rather than stacking them as others did. A bit unusual, but not worth mentioning. The main event was my beef Wellington, 2 large trays that I'd spent hours preparing, each cut into 6 generous portions. With 12 people attending, I'd made enough for everyone to have 1 slice, with a few extras for anyone wanting seconds. "Everyone, please help yourselves." I announced as I went to retrieve the fresh-baked rolls from the oven. When I returned less than 2 minutes later, the atmosphere in the dining room had completely changed. Everyone looked frozen, with expressions ranging from shock to discomfort. My eyes followed their gaze to Gabrielle's plate, or rather, plates. She had taken 4 slices of beef Wellington, 1/3 of the entire dish, and arranged them between her dinner plate, salad bowl, and soup bowl. She was already cutting into the first piece, seemingly oblivious to the stunned silence around her. Fiona was shooting warning glances at everyone, her expression clearly saying, "Don't you dare say a word." My stomach dropped. I'd spent nearly £250 on ingredients for this meal, carefully budgeting to create something special within our group's financial arrangement. Now, several people wouldn't get a full portion of the main course. I didn't know what to do. Should I say something? Should I pretend not to notice? My mind flashed back to my own struggles with binge eating. I knew what it felt like to be unable to control yourself around food. But I'd never taken food from others or ignored social boundaries this way. In the end, I said nothing. I simply sat down and tried to keep the conversation flowing. Thomas and I shared a single slice, as did Mia and her husband. Everyone else got one piece, though I could tell some were still hungry afterward. For dessert, I carefully portioned the chocolate soufflés before bringing them to the table. Gabrielle asked if there were extras, and when I explained there weren't, she looked genuinely disappointed. As everyone was leaving, Eleanor whispered to me. That was intense. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but truthfully, I was shaken. Not by Gabrielle's size, but by the complete disregard for the group's shared experience. I'd never encountered a situation like this before and had no idea how to handle the next dinner. The following month, it was Mia's turn to host. She's always been more direct than me, with a musician's precision and organizational skills. When I told her what had happened at my dinner, she nodded thoughtfully. "Don't worry," she said. "I have a plan." Mia served an elegant French-inspired meal, but unlike our usual family-style service, she plated everything individually in the kitchen. Each person received an identical, generous portion of coq au vin with perfectly arranged vegetables and potatoes. When Gabrielle asked for seconds, Mia smiled apologetically. "I'm so sorry, I've portioned everything exactly. There aren't any extras tonight." This wasn't entirely true. Mia always prepares with military precision, but I knew she usually had some backup in the kitchen. She was establishing a boundary in the kindest way possible. The dinner proceeded normally, though I noticed Gabrielle seemed less engaged than before, checking her watch frequently. After dessert, also pre-portioned, Fiona and Gabrielle left immediately, declining coffee and the board games we usually played afterward. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Fiona had sent a blistering text to Mia. "I can't believe how you controlled and policed Gabrielle's eating last night. Do you have any idea how much courage it takes for her to eat in front of others? She's been discriminated against her entire life because of her size, and I thought our friend group would be different. You humiliated her by restricting her food. This is exactly the kind of fatphobic behavior that makes her anxious about social situations." Mia forwarded the message to me with a simple "wow." Before I could respond, my phone pinged again with a message from Fiona to me. "Sophie, I trusted you would be sensitive to Gabrielle's needs when it's your turn to host again. After your own struggles with weight and body image, I thought you of all people would understand. Please don't follow Mia's example next month. Gabrielle needs acceptance, not judgment." I stared at my phone, my anxiety spiraling. My turn was coming up in 2 weeks, and I had no idea what to do. I'd planned a traditional Sunday roast with prime rib, an expensive meal that would strain my budget if I needed to double the portions for one guest. But this wasn't just about money. Fiona's message bothered me deeply. Yes, I understood body image struggles and the pain of feeling judged for your size. But was enabling someone to take food from others really acceptance? Was it my responsibility to provide unlimited food to one guest at the expense of everyone else's experience? After days of worrying, I decided to seek advice anonymously online. I created a throwaway account on a relationship advice forum and carefully described the situation, changing names and some details to protect everyone's privacy. I wrote honestly about my concerns, the financial strain, the group dynamics, my desire to be a generous host without enabling harmful behavior, and my own history with disordered eating that made watching someone binge particularly triggering for me. The responses came quickly and were overwhelmingly supportive. Most people agreed this wasn't about body size, but about basic consideration and social boundaries. This isn't fat shaming. It's about one person taking a disproportionate amount of food that others paid for. Your friend is putting you in an impossible position by expecting you to accommodate behavior that makes everyone uncomfortable. Pre-plating like Mia did seems like the perfect solution. Everyone gets a fair portion. I felt validated and decided to follow Mia's approach for my upcoming dinner. I'd prepared generous individual portions, including a double portion for Gabrielle, but wouldn't serve family style where she could take unlimited amounts. The night before my dinner, I was finalizing the menu when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Fiona and Gabrielle standing there, both looking furious. How could you? Fiona thrust her phone in my face, showing my forum post. Gabrielle's friend recognized your story about the beef Wellington and showed her. You humiliated her online. My heart sank. Despite changing details, the specifics of the meal had made the story recognizable to someone who'd heard about it from Gabrielle's perspective. Gabrielle was crying, her face red with anger and embarrassment. You made me sound like some kind of monster. I thought you were different, Sophie. I thought you understood what it's like to be judged for your body. I tried to explain that my post wasn't about her size, but about the behavior at the dinner, but they weren't listening. Their voices grew louder, attracting the attention of my parents who were visiting from Oxford for the weekend. My father, a retired psychologist, came downstairs and calmly intervened. Why don't we all take a breath? Fiona, why don't you and I talk in the living room? Gabrielle, perhaps you could speak with Sophie's mother in the kitchen? We should discuss this like adults. To my relief, they agreed. I retreated to my bedroom, hands shaking, while my parents used their professional skills to de-escalate the situation. After about an hour, my mother knocked on my bedroom door. They're calmer now. Your father thinks you should join us. In the living room, Fiona and Gabrielle sat stiffly on the couch while my father maintained his therapist's neutral expression. The atmosphere was tense but no longer explosive. Sophie, my father began, I've been talking with Fiona and Gabrielle about their feelings regarding your post. I think it would be helpful if you explained your perspective directly to them. Taking a deep breath, I tried to articulate my dilemma as honestly as possible. I'm truly sorry for posting about this situation in a way that was recognizable. That wasn't my intention, and I apologize for any embarrassment it caused, I began. But I need you both to understand my position too. I've always prided myself on being a generous host. I love feeding people. It's how I show love. I explained how I'd struggled with my own eating disorder, how I'd nearly eaten myself to death at my heaviest, and how watching someone else engage in similar behavior was deeply triggering for me. I'm not judging Gabrielle for her size, I emphasized. But I can in good conscience facilitate unlimited eating that reminds me of my own darkest times. Additionally, our dinners operate on a shared budget. When one person takes significantly more than their share, it affects everyone. I offered what I thought was a reasonable compromise. I'm happy to provide Gabrielle with double portions, which is still very generous, but I can't offer unlimited food at these events. It's not fair to the others, and honestly, it's not healthy for any of us. Fiona's expression hardened. So you're saying Gabrielle's needs don't matter? That she should restrict herself to make others comfortable? That's not what I'm saying, I replied. I'm saying there needs to be balance. Everyone's needs matter, including mine and the rest of the group's. Gabrielle spoke up, her voice quieter than before. All my life, I've dreamed of having friends who would accept me as I am, where I could eat without being watched and judged. Fiona said you would be that safe space for me. I felt a pang of sympathy, but also frustration. I can accept you as a person while still having boundaries about behavior that affects others. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They left shortly after, saying they needed time to think. Fiona's parting words were, "We'll let you know if we're coming tomorrow." The next morning, I received a text from Fiona. After much reflection, "I cannot forgive you for humiliating Gabrielle online unless you demonstrate true remorse by providing what she needs, an unlimited buffet at your home. Her eating is a disability that should be accommodated, just like you'd build a ramp for Thomas's wheelchair. Either you accept her fully or not at all." I stared at the message for a long time, tears welling in my eyes. This ultimatum made it clear that Fiona wasn't interested in compromise. She wanted complete capitulation. With a heavy heart, I replied, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I care about both of you, but I can't agree to your terms. My own health and the group's dynamics matter too. The offer of double portions stands if you change your mind." She never responded. Later that day, I learned that Eleanor had also sided with Fiona, feeling I had betrayed the group's trust by discussing our problems online. I canceled the next day's dinner, too emotionally drained to host. Instead, I invited the remaining friends over for a casual pizza night the following weekend to discuss what had happened. "I feel terrible about losing Fiona's friendship," I admitted as we sat in my living room. "But I also feel like I was put in an impossible position." Thomas nodded. "You were. Fiona was asking you to ignore your own boundaries and everyone else's comfort for Gabrielle's benefit. That's not fair." "I miss Fiona," Mia said quietly. "But she changed when she started dating Gabrielle. It became all about accommodating Gabrielle's needs, regardless of how it affected anyone else." We decided to continue our monthly dinners with the remaining members. Over time, we invited new friends, Mia's colleague William, who played jazz piano beautifully, Thomas's physiotherapist Maria, who turned out to be an amazing baker, and my neighbor James, who had just moved from Edinburgh and was eager to make friends in London. 6 months later, our feast club was thriving again. We maintained the £30 contribution, but increased it to £40 to account for inflation and rising food costs. The dinners remained our monthly highlight, a space where we could escape everyday stress and create something beautiful together. I occasionally thought of Fiona and Gabrielle, hoping they were well. I wondered if Fiona realized that true acceptance doesn't mean enabling harmful behavior, but rather caring enough to establish healthy boundaries. The experience taught me something valuable. Generosity has limits, and setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone isn't giving them everything they want, but rather being honest about what you can and cannot provide. Our feast club continues to this day, a testament to the resilience of friendship and the power of breaking bread together in reasonable, thoughtful portions.
So there you have it, a friendship-ending feast that forced Sophie to make an impossible choice between maintaining her boundaries and preserving a long-term friendship. What started as a welcoming dinner party spiraled into a dramatic confrontation that ultimately reshaped her entire social circle. This story touches on something we all face in our relationships. Where do we draw the line between generosity and self-respect? Sophie wanted to be a gracious host and supportive friend, but Fiona's ultimatum put her in an untenable position. Should she have compromised her own values and the group's experience to accommodate Gabrielle's demands? Or was she right to stand firm on what she felt was reasonable? Perhaps the most telling moment was when Fiona compared Gabrielle's eating habits to Thomas's need for wheelchair access. But there's a crucial difference here that many of us recognize instinctively. Accommodating a disability typically doesn't come at others' expense or enable potentially harmful behavior. True acceptance doesn't mean removing all boundaries. Sometimes it means caring enough to establish healthy ones. That I think what makes this story so compelling is how it reflects situations we've all encountered, perhaps on a smaller scale. We've all had moments where we had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for what we believe is right. We've all wondered if we're being too rigid or not firm enough in our boundaries. What would you have done in Sophie's position? Would you have given in to keep the friendship? Stood your ground like she did? Or found some other compromise? Have you ever had to end a relationship because someone demanded you cross your personal boundaries? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear about your own experiences with difficult social situations or times when you had to choose between being nice and being fair to yourself and others. That if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest Reddit drama. We post new relationship stories every week that will make you think, feel, and maybe even reevaluate your own boundaries. And if you know someone who struggles with setting limits in their relationships, share this video with them. Sometimes it helps to know we're not alone in these challenging situations.